Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Beyond the Alert. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dave Howard and Jesse Mainor of ECS. So a little bit background of both of our awesome guests. Dave is a Senior Director of Cyber Operations, where he leads a team of more than 60 multidisciplinary cybersecurity professionals to help drive the company's cybersecurity and security operations initiatives. With over 2 decades of experience in building and managing intelligence teams and security operations centers, he's been instrumental in developing next-gen managed SOC offerings for federal and commercial clients. And Jesse is a SOC manager at ECS and oversees 24/7 SOC operations, including staffing, shift scheduling, workload optimization, analyst development, and so much more. He specializes in aligning SOC operations with enterprise-wide security objectives. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having us, Ann. We appreciate the invite for sure.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited.
I'm thrilled. We get to have both of your perspectives today, get different angles on one topic. So really, really excited to be here. Today's focus is going to be how to build a high-performing SOC in the age of AI. So I think the first question our guests would love to know is whether your organization and team were AI forward when you started this initiative, or if you had to convince them. How did you start the process?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it took us, quite a bit of time and some planning and some blood, sweat, and tears, right, to get here. But walking back a little bit, the ECS MSP, our group, has been around for about 7 years, right? And like most security operations centers, we were highly manual. We were siloed into our separate domains, and alert fatigue, like all other SOCs, right, became a significant problem. And so, looking at the problems that we had, we tried to bucket those into people, process, and technology. We hired the right people, we trained them up, we empowered them to be, high quality analysts to make decisions on their own and to lead within their domains. Processes is something that Jesse can talk about all day long, right? We buttoned up our processes, got our playbooks in place, right? Make sure everything was aligned across the different security operations teams and engineering, threat hunting, all the groups. Then we had the technology in place, right? I would say that before we wanted to look at AI and machine learning, SOAR, or that is, security orchestration, automation, and response, was the first place we wanted to put, our efforts to see what we could automate, right? And we know that, AI really is automation in and of itself. And what we're looking to do is automate those routine, repetitive processes that are bogging a SOC down. We'll get to alert fatigue later. And we got some good results from our SOAR program. And we still, we're running into the alert fatigue problem at the height, of our alert volume. I think we're doing about 30,000 alerts a month. And Jesse has some metrics on, how much time, how many minutes, we're talking, 5 minutes or less, an analyst could work on an alert. And if they're rushing through that quickly, obviously they're not going to be putting the attention and a level of quality into the analysis that we expect and that our customers expect. And so AI, became, the natural next phase of this SOC modernization effort. And that brought us to Dropzone, and the rest is history.
Awesome. You're certainly doing revolutionary things at ECS compared to other MSSPs. So would love to learn, how did you, from the SOAR standpoint, where did you go next?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So, we found Dropzone doing some market analysis, looking across the different spaces. The real trigger for us to proceed with our relationship with Dropzone was the real conversations we have with you guys, right? So, very early on, we made the determination that we were going to be AI forward, but we were going to be thoughtful, right, in the AI tools that we brought in, right? We're not looking to bring in AI for the sake of bringing in AI because our board members are interested in it, or, a senior leader saw something on LinkedIn and thought it looked cool, right? So we were going to be thoughtful and target, the core problems that we were facing that we thought AI could be a solution for, right? And I think this is a good place for Jesse to talk about, how we, POV'd Dropzone, the value we saw, how we presented that to our leadership team, which got the buy-in, right, that we needed to move forward and brought us to where we are today. So Jesse, if you don't mind running through that, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. Like Dave was saying, at the height of it, we were doing about 30,000 alerts a month. And the alert overload was definitely a big focus after we had kind of maximized everything that we could do with SOAR. We had workflows doing enrichment on open source intelligence. We had initial searches being ran in different security tools. It had all decreased our mean time to triage, but we still had a lot of alerts, and we still wanted to accelerate our mean time to triage more, but also provide more consistent handling and more context to the analysts on the alerts that they were getting, just to up our escalation workflow and make our analysts more efficient and to minimize our scalability constraints as well. So those were kind of the things that we were looking at in our POV. So alert overload, that mean time to triage acceleration, the handling, the context, and the efficiency and scalability of analysts. And after we had completed our POV, we saw like a positive side of all of those things. We saw more actionable alerts, accelerated mean time to triage because those alerts had that consistent handling. They had the rich context. The escalation data became very streamlined, and the analysts were super efficient and much more scalable. So to me, I'd say Dropzone didn't just support us; it helped to redefine our operations.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jesse. And to piggyback on something, that we had talked about before, and that's, we prioritize SOAR. I think a recommendation that we give any security operations center who's really looking to bring AI into the portfolio, right, to enhance their operations, is don't discount some of those core technologies like the workflows that you can do in EDR and your SAN, right, and especially SOAR, right. Jesse has a fairly cool phrase, right? SOAR, or I'm sorry, Dropzone for us is the brain, SOAR is the arms and legs. And so bringing those two together has been very critical for us, right? And we would not have gone straight to an AI solution without looking at something like SOAR. You're sort of skipping a couple steps if you try to bring in AI, putting band-aids on a gunshot wound, is how I would describe it.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I think the help with having SOAR already implemented and running really well and already doing some initial enrichment made us be able to adapt that Dropzone implementation model where, like you said, Dropzone was the brain and SOAR was our arms and legs. So we did end up going with a hybrid model where we have our alert sources flowing directly into the SOAR, where we could still have our initial processes run that we already had for triage and enrichment. And after that was completed and, things that we already had SOAR auto closing or enriching, we could send the rest through over to Dropzone. So Dropzone ended up integrating perfectly already into our workflows, where originally from the alert source to SOAR, we would send it to our ticketing system. Now the investigation that had already been enriched and partially triaged was being sent over to Dropzone, where Dropzone provided that structured triage, the investigation conclusion, notes and findings on any downstream systems, and was able to do more of a thought question, hypothesis based investigation that's a little bit more difficult to build with SOAR when you have a lot of different trees that you can go down in your investigation, and all of that being passed over to ServiceNow, where it would get that Dropzone output, it would enrich those tickets.
And how does that change the time to investigation and those data points? How did you look at that? Because obviously AI is so new, right? You're kind of forging the groundwork of what does the ROI look like? What are the expectations? And then level setting the internal stakeholders as well.
Yeah, I can start and I'll pass it over to Dave on the mean time to triage portion. We have all of our mean time metrics calculated, and we were actually able to see about a 40% decrease in our mean time to triage for alerts that Dropzone had either enriched or helped to auto close after we had gone through all of the foundational workflows and the processes and technology that had been involved, and we got to auto close. So about a 40% decrease in mean time to triage is what we saw once we integrated Dropzone into our existing workflows.
Yeah, and for me, those mean times are important, right? I have to report to a board and to a CIO and a CISO, and so those are critical metrics. But what mattered more to me was reducing burnout and scaling people, and that's something we saw very quickly, right? And a quick data point there is we did have a team of 14 tier ones full time, 24/7, all US based. After bringing on Dropzone and relieving some of that pressure, some of that alert fatigue from them, we're now operating more alerts or triaging more alerts with fewer people, right? So now that T1 headcount is 12. I also immediately started, hearing feedback from the team that they were, relieved. They're able to spend more time, on their investigations. And this just really snowballs, right? Because it's not just reducing alert fatigue, right? Those people have more time again to do deeper investigations, but now we're upskilling them. Maybe somebody wants to learn detection engineering or threat hunting or one of your classical engineering disciplines, right? If we need someone to, go through the playbooks and update documentation, they got time to do that. And so, we're seeing the value across, people, process, and technology, right? Just by being smart and having brought AI into our operations.
I think that's an interesting point too, Dave, about the mean time to triage, because we also, over all of the clients, we did see a decrease in the mean time to triage, especially the mean time to acknowledge and how long it took to start and pick up an investigation, because Dropzone was assisting with that triage and initial investigation. But we did see that the time that was saved in performing the initial analysis that Dropzone would automate was spent on deep dive investigations, on threat hunting, on searching for more, you know, deep level investigation that we initially didn't have as much time to do. So like Dave was saying, once the initial investigation's out of the way, you have a lot of time to pivot on the extra things that have already been kind of first touched on. And you can really start to dig deep into these investigations and provide better analysis to your clients. So we definitely saw a lot of that deeper level analysis being sent over, and the clients noticed it as well.
I was going to say, certainly sounds like a win-win between reducing alert fatigue. Your employee base has more ability to be strategic and up-level their career. And then on the client side, it's a differentiator, right? Because you have that much more to offer them compared to other MSSPs.
Yeah, we didn't touch on the quality piece, right? And so what we love about, bringing an AI solution like Dropzone in is that it's going to do the investigation the same way every time, right? It's repeatable. It doesn't need to eat. It doesn't need to sleep. I don't worry about Dropzone having bad analysis because it's tired at 2 a.m. where humans are going to have that factor. And so not just the quality of the investigations that Dropzone's doing, but our analysts, when they pick up the escalations, they see what right looks like, right? And they're trained real time, which is making them just better analysts. And so it's just a great all around, force multiplier for our T1s.
Awesome. And I think we always get questions from our prospects of, how do we go about prepping for the POC? What does that buyer journey look like? What does good look like? Would love to hear more about that.
I think a lot of organizations, the first step, right, is getting leadership buy-in to bring AI into the fold, right, into your operations. And so you're going to have your governance and risk and compliance conversations, right? Does the vendor have SOC 2, Type 2? That's one of the gates for us, right? And just to make sure that when you bring something like Dropzone or another tool in, right? We do this all the time, making sure that it's not going to affect the certifications and governance that requirements that you have. Once you get through that gate, it's getting leadership, buy-in, and that was my job here, right? I had to put the business case together, show, clearly where the manual operations that we were delivering, right? We're not failing, but we're resulting in us having to, meet the demand on alert volume with additional headcount, right? And so this is a business conversation now. We know that we cannot scale headcount linearly with the additional alerts, and alerts are not going to slow down anytime soon. We're going to connect more data sources, the hybrid environments between on-prem and cloud. It's just becoming more complex, right? And so it was a pretty easy for me in ECS, and thankfully ECS is an AI forward, company. We are a technology company, and so once I passed those gates, we were, given the thumbs up to do the POV, and I tapped Jesse to do that, and he ran an exceptional POV, right? And we've briefed it up and down, the $1.5 billion company that we are, to our sister segments, and showing them, what you can do if thoughtful, in approaching AI. And Jesse, I'll let you talk about, the POV and, the rubric that we created, the scoring, success criteria, all the things.
Yeah, I would just want to tap and agree with Dave. Like, I think a big myth in security operations is more people is better security. I think the truth is we just need smarter processes. So most SOCs, they're under leveraged, they're not under resourced. So like Dave was saying, a new client is more alerts and you hire more analysts. And I think Dropzone AI really helped us break that linear head hiring model. So now 50% of our alerts auto handles, doesn't force that proportional headcount growth. And that's kind of what we were looking for as well in the POV with, the alert overload. So like you were asking, what would somebody do after the business justification came through to allow the POV or the POC? I would figure out what are your issues? What are you trying to solve with your AI? Like Dave said earlier, you don't want to just throw AI in just to put it on your slide deck when you're presenting to someone. What are the actual operational challenges that you want to solve with your AI? And so that's what we kind of talked about a little bit earlier with the alert overload, mean time to triage, the handling and the context making sure we're efficient and scalable is really what we were trying to solve there. So once we had figured out what we wanted to solve, we had to look at how we were going to implement it into an existing model. And that's where the Dropzone is the brain, SOAR is our arms and legs comes in with our hybrid implementation model of alert sources coming into the SOAR, doing its triage enrichment, passing that to Dropzone, finally making its way over to the analyst team. So once you have your challenges, you know what you're going to look for, you understand the model that you're going to implement it, then you want to stand up your POV. And what we noticed in our POV is, we needed to still build foundational workflows in order for Dropzone to integrate perfectly into the existing workflows that we had. So we wanted to do things that revolved around governance and access, document Dropzone's use, management, the maintenance of it, everything we had to configure from SSO to role-based access to workflow controls, like defining which alert sources and severities would go to Dropzone. We typically lean towards the side of if it's high risk and high confidence, 100% human touch. So we started more on the lower fidelity alerts and sources that we would send through to Dropzone. When then, with any POV comes the money, the business aspect. So we needed to set up some sort of credit limiter to make sure that our usage was within the budget. And then came the integration and the enrichment portion of it. After we had done months of testing, we pushed Dropzone investigation notes into our tickets. We did a lot of testing, a lot of tuning the AI, because it came through as a very good tier 1 analyst and knew how to do an investigation very well. And what you'll find is it doesn't know the environment that you're working in, and every client environment is different. So really you're not training it to be a good tier 1. You're training Dropzone to be a good tier 1 for this client. And with a lot of clients that we had to train our model differently in our different tenants, so that it would, triage the same alert 2 different ways for 2 different clients and still come to an actionable outcome for them. So once we had gotten that enrichment set up, we sent it over to the analyst. And that's where we started to see those reductions in mean time to triage because the alert was already enriched, and where we got to see them spending more of their time on deep dive investigations and ask more questions, about threat hunting and trying to actually understand the alert that was coming in and not just chug through the alerts. So yeah, and then after that is the last step I would say for a POV is making sure that you have good quality standpoint so that you can do some sort of QA, quality assurance audit. We ended up building a lot of scheduled audit reports to review investigation accuracy, to make sure that whatever Dropzone was saying, the analyst agreed. And that was actually a really cool thing that we saw during our POV, because sometimes Dropzone would say benign, and analysts would say, no, we need to escalate that. And sometimes Dropzone was right. And it was actually a training opportunity that we could pass to the analyst when we were looking at those different opinions. And then other times, the analyst was right and Dropzone needed to be trained. So it was really cool to see that our AI actually helped train our analysts and our analysts helped train our AI as well.
Thinking about, POVs kind of at a more macro level, right? We're not going to stop operations to do a POV, and we can't hire headcount, right? That all they're going to do is test out new technology. And so we do this all the time. I'm sure your listeners do as well. You're going to have to do these POVs and build it in flight. And so the advice I would give to anybody looking to do like a highly technical POV is really don't discount the amount of work that you need to do to establish your success criteria, understand truly what your requirements are, what are the problems that you're trying to solve, right? And that gives you a good foothold at the beginning of your POV if you're evaluating multiple technologies to make sure you're approaching this objectively and you're not trying to back a tool that you think is really cool into your requirements, right? Confirmation bias.
Can see a couple of threads here. The really data-driven approach. You made sure you knew what you wanted to test out, and you built Dropzone into all of your day-to-day workflows, which is another one of the questions that pops up a lot of, okay, how does my workflow change with Dropzone? But you put a lot of thought into how does that work together? You're leveraging SOAR with it. Some vendors say SOAR is dead. There is that. But really interesting to see because you're really walking the talk on AI human collaboration And love that you highlighted, Jesse, that sometimes AI trains the human, sometimes it's the other way around. And to us, it's not either or, but it's both working hand in hand that gives you truly the cutting edge. What did that do from an alert fatigue standpoint?
I think from an alert fatigue standpoint, it helped a lot. Once we had moved through a lot of enrichment and auto closure for Dropzone on low severity alerts, they started to see a lot of reprieve from the queue. So as our Dropzone automation started to ramp up slowly over time, because we were very methodical and a lot of QA with it. As that started to ramp up, the volume started to go down. We had other initiatives on the back end as well to continue to decrease our volume. And it really started, I think, after the alert fatigue, it started to shift people's perspective as these alerts aren't just events. They're not just tickets in my queue. They started to see them more as evidence and actual having time to do a deep dive investigation. So I think they felt a lot of reprieve from the queue.
And if I could just say it right, all this technical mumbo jumbo, but our team is having fun now. They're back to having fun. They're not burning out every day trying to flip. I don't know, Jesse, how many alerts were doing a shift, or was like the minimum they had to do to keep up with the queue?
Minimally, it was a couple thousand a week.
Wow.
Yeah, it was significant, right? But now they're coming in, they can spend more time, all the things that we've already talked about, but they enjoy working, with the AI. And that's something that was very important to us, right? We are always going to have one, a human in the loop, but two, the approach that we're not here to replace our most valuable resource, our people, with technology. We see the headlines all the time, right? That, jobs will be lost, thousands laid off because of AI. Sure, that's going to happen. That's not the approach we're taking, right? Because the AI is just a force multiplier and it's a tool in our humans toolbox, right? We're still gonna lean and rely on the critical thinking skills that humans, bring to the fight, the judgment skills that we need them, to bring to that fight.
100%, Dave. I think it reinforced the tier one analysts having this ownership on the decisions. They felt like, they were a decision maker again and not just a data gatherer.
That's fantastic to hear because our mission is always to make sure that the humans can be more strategic, and we like to have fun at work as well. And I also think that it's fascinating to see how you took that approach. Right? What are you trying to get out of it? To your point, Dave, it's not a quick POC. You have to keep the lights on, keep everything running, put a lot of thought and strategic approaches into a POV to understand what is the expected outcome. Is it worth it? And I think a key piece you both highlighted is the ability to customize the AI, right? Depending on the client base, the tribal knowledge of an industry, different kind of potential alerts and attack vectors. These are all customizations that a human would have to figure out. And then I suppose when you scale as well with your clientele, really proving the value early on, you have a massive leg up compared to the competition, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Something I left out on our conversation around kind of how we got to the POV with Dropzone. So we know that all of the OEMs right now are pushing out their own flavor of AI. The Intel makers have, the LLMs that will synthesize Intel reports for you. The SIMs have their AI assistants or chatbots, CrowdStrike and Charlotte, Elastic and AI assistant, right? That can help with the triage process. But as an MSSP, that's great, but we have customers on multiple SIMs and we've got multiple ERs and we've got the SOAR, right? And so for us, it was very important that we found the solution that worked further up the stack, as close to the analysts where they were triaging out of, which is ServiceNow for us, as possible, so that they could look across all those technologies, all those vendors, right? And make sense of, a much wider swath of intelligence and information.
I just want to say that I think that was also a really big win in the POV is all the integrations that Dropzone had. So we were able to link up a lot of our different tools to it for a single client, which is like Dave is saying, the AI on a single security tool is only going to look at that single security tool, whereas Dropzone is going to take a look at the SIM and it's going to gather data there. It's going to go to your EDR, gather data there. Any integration that you add to it, it will use that as a data source to pivot and to do investigations. And that was a big win as well on the AI side, like Dave was saying, being agnostic to the tools, which is how we are as a SOC as well.
Okay, going to switch gears just a little bit here. So, Jesse, you've obviously had massive experience as a tier one analyst, now lead an entire SOC operation. If you could go back and tell your tier one self one thing that would have changed your career trajectory, what would that be?
I don't know if it would have necessarily changed the trajectory, but I remember when I first started as a tier one, I thought success meant clearing the queue faster than everyone else and doing more tickets than everyone else. I thought it was the more tickets I do, the better I would look, right? So I think if I could tell my tier one self one thing, it would be don't just chase alerts, chase the understanding of the alert. As a tier one, like we've been saying, you can see 10,000 alerts in a year, and the volume isn't scaling with just my human effort alone. The volume is infinite. It can be infinite, but my attention isn't. So I would have focused much earlier on leveraging automation and enrichment, and instead of trying to manually triage everything and been putting in, requests for those kinds of things. Because the real skill is not so much just closing all of the alerts, it's that contextual decision making, like Dave was saying. What asset, what identity, what business function. The real skill isn't just like seeing the alert and doing the alert. It's really understanding the pattern behind it and understanding the alert. So I think that's what I would have told my tier one self is don't chase the alerts, chase the understanding of the alerts. I think it will help you grow a lot quicker as well. And just maybe some more early exposure to metrics and looking at prioritization matrices of how you're defining alerts, severity, like confidence by impact kind of thing, risk-based decision making. I think that would have been a lot of help.
So we've spanned the gamut from, how to implement AI in your SOC to human AI collaboration. And with that, a lot of our guests really focus on their leadership style as well as how they work with their teams. I think one of the biggest pieces vendors, especially from a marketing standpoint, don't look at is, the tech is great, but the tech is only as good as the humans using it. And really, for me, the biggest learning has been so far from all of our fantastic guests that you need a specific mindset in the SOC and mentorship and leadership style. So much of it comes down to the humans, especially when there is an incident and how to respond to that and manage up and down. And so with that, I'd love to hear from you both your leadership style and get both of your takes.
Sure. I love this question. So I really have an atypical path to the position that I'm in right now, right? So I started as an infantryman in the Army, right? A couple overseas deployments, Iraq and Afghanistan, transitioned over to counter-terrorist intelligence analysis, the intel community, where I led teams in both intel operations and analysis, and then over to CISA, running the CTI team and where I'm at today. But, I really learned the foundation of who I am as a leader in the military. I know this is a buzzword that gets thrown out a lot, but I believe very strongly in it, and it's servant leadership, right? So if you think about that pyramid of hierarchy and organization, and you got your staff and your managers, the executives, right? You essentially flip that upside down or reverse that order, right? And so my job really is to empower Jesse and his teams and all my folks, right, to deliver good outcomes and enjoy what they're doing. And so that could be removing roadblocks, setting them up with training. Really, it's a support function is how I see myself now, and that's how I lead. Jesse.
I love that you said that servant leadership and flipping the pyramid upside down and your atypical way to come in because I was very typical path to SOC manager. I was a tier one, a tier two, a tier three, and now a SOC manager. And as a tier one, tier two, tier three, I was lucky to have a lot of servant leadership where they did listen to our opinions and was passed down to help us make those decisions and empower us to do that. So as a SOC manager, I love listening to my tier ones, my tier twos, my tier three, tier one boots on the ground. I always tell the tier twos, your main role is to support your tier ones. They're out there doing the tickets. They're on the front lines. Your job is to make their job easier. Tuning, exceptions, playbooks, getting on calls with clients, pushing things through. And the tier three role is similar as well. And that's how I see myself now. But the answer to what my leadership style is a little interesting. I feel like I'm a
Democratic dictator.
democratic dictator. Yes, thank you. A democratic dictator is my leadership style. Yes, because I love to listen to what everyone has to say. I think everyone always has valid input, and I love to take in everybody's opinions. But when you are put into a new leadership role, you have to be able to make decisions, and sometimes you have to be able to make tough decisions. And I think that's where the dictatorship part comes in. It's just sometimes you have to be ready to make those decisions.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I'll also say that, culture, another buzzword, right? But it's something that we believe strongly in. And look, we're an MSSP and we know that the grind working in this business is significant. And last year we tracked this as a metric, right? Our attrition rate was under 4%. It was like 3.2%. And that's not something, to sneeze at, right? That's super important.
No small feat.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a result. I feel strongly on how Jesse leads his team and how we lead as a team, right? I'm never going to be the smartest person in the room, and I'm okay with that, right? I hire smart people who tell me what to do. And that goes back to that servant leadership piece too. But can't, understate how important it is to build that culture. And it starts, top down, how you're leading people, the standards that you're setting for your managers, if you're a director, and the standards they set for their people, extremely important for, culture, morale, and then that translates into better outcomes and better operations.
Yeah, and from the customer or the vendor side, we've certainly seen that you're one of our favorite customers. We love working with you. Every one of your team members is fantastic, and I mean, we can tell you guys have fun at work. You work hard, but I didn't know that servant leadership is a buzzword. I never heard it before this podcast. Before I started hosting guests, and I love the phrase because you're only as good as your team, right? You have to take input. When there's a win, you give it to your team, and when there's a failure point, which is only failure if you didn't learn from the error. You usually take the hit as the leader, and it really shows when you trust your team, you enable them and get out of their way.
Yeah, 100%. Just get out of their way, right? Give them space to make mistakes, right? Put some guardrails up. It's okay to make mistakes, right? I want people who work for me and work with me, right? Not for me, with me. We work together. Jesse works with me to have the leeway, to have the space to have an idea, right? And run with that idea. And if they fall, cool. We're going to pick each other up. We're going to fix it. I'll make the same mistake twice and move out.
All right. So, different angle. When you're hiring for your SOC, what's one quality that matters more than technical skills?
I'll jump in really quick, Dave, just because I want to touch on something that you said earlier. I think curiosity sometimes beats out credentials. I want to hire curious people and not train tools. So it's hard to teach someone that investigative instinct, to be comfortable with things being ambiguous and having incomplete data as the norm. In a SOC role, you want all of the data, but most clients can't afford to put every single piece of data evidence that you could possibly want inside of your SIM or inside your EDR. So it's it is you're always working with this incomplete data. So I like people that have that curiosity, like Dave was saying earlier. What story is this data telling me? What am I missing? What do I need to confirm? And then the story behind everything. So I think, and then being adaptable as well. Workflows are always evolving. Automation improves, like with Dropzone. We're always trying to get better. So someone that can adapt as well is something that I'll really look for.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. For me, I'll just say this, but I'm going to give you a different answer, right? Two things I tell anybody that come in my team, right? All they have to do to be successful is deliver results, right? Deliver good outcomes for the customer and for the organization, and be a team player. With that said, what I look for is judgment under pressure. And what I mean by that is we can train skills all day long. If you don't have the technical chops, or you have some gaps on a certain process or technology, we can train that, right? Pretty easy, but we can't change temperament, especially when you're under pressure and in security operations and cybersecurity in general, right? It's constant problems and constant pressure. And so I'm looking, for somebody, or I'm looking how they think at 3 a.m. when they're exhausted, not how they test at 3 p.m. And going back to the military days, right? If you think of U.S. Army Ranger School, probably one of the best conventional force leadership schools in the world. It's less about their ability to shoot, right, or fast rope out helicopter. It's all about how they make decisions and how they lead when they're under sleep deprivation, they're malnourished, they're tired, they're staying up days on end, right? They get one MRE a day. That's where you test people when they're at the outer edges of their limits, right? And they have that brain fog. How do you operate under pressure? And if something pops off at 2 a.m. and we have to get on to an IR, I want to know that my team members are ready and can jump in and sprint making, critical decisions quickly.
That's a whole nother topic for a new podcast episode of how do you test an interview?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
All right. Question from the last SOC leader, Sneha Rajmi. What was your favorite incident? And she said, I quote, like, what's one incident you learned so much from? Was it something you still remember and you say, ooh, that was so bad, you get goosebumps, but not in a good way?
Last year's incident response around the misuse of the Microsoft Direct Send feature. And to kind of go back a year ago, try to pull from my memory, Direct Send is a native feature in Microsoft where you can send, emails, from a internal domain to another user, right? It's a feature that's used, commonly for good reasons, but threat actors obviously are going to find a way to misuse that. And so, we saw that quickly with one of our clients. In fact, it was actually ECS, right? So I was receiving emails from myself, right, phishing emails with malicious links, and did some threat hunting and saw exposure across every one of our managed clients. And so what that looks like, right, is over a 24-hour period, we were running 15 IRs in parallel with a fairly small IR team, and so we're talking 15 bridges that were stood up, right? And me, Jesse, and a couple other stock leads and T3s just bouncing from client to client, making sure that they're doing the remediation and all the checks and investigation they need to do, right? And it went so well. I'm so proud of the team, being able to do those IRs at scale. And then Jesse, I'll let you kind of, fill in the technical gaps on that.
No, yeah, I agree. I remember that. Having to bounce between all of them was, I would say, similar to that Army Ranger testing at the extremes, right? 15 IRs simultaneously, jumping between bridges, having 15 calls stood up, making sure nothing gets, it's all segmented well. And there was no immediate fix for direct send at the time. Microsoft hadn't rolled out the patch yet, so it wasn't as easy as just flip a switch. We really had to kind of go full response on it. Threat hunting across every customer tenant to identify all the affected mailboxes, to find all of the users that were sent things, whether or not they clicked it, diving into the Microsoft email telemetry beyond just normal threat intel that you usually would get like in your SIM, all the email logs for the indicators of compromise, blocking everything, purging everything, because it didn't really trigger your traditional alerts. Like Dave was saying, we had to engage red team as well to simulate the exploit, to test the mitigations that we were putting in, and the inbox rules and protections were working for every client in multiple scenarios, and just coordinating all of that and keeping up with it while we were waiting for official vendor guidance was a lot. It was really the whole 9 yards, and it was that real time pressure, real time, like, incident response under that extreme pressure, so
Yeah, and tying back to our conversation a little bit about, servant leadership and culture, right? Because there was the technical aspect of responding to an incident, but more importantly, it was, giving our teams that level of comfort that, yeah, the leadership, we're gonna be there. Our customers are stressing, blood pressure is up, the operational tempo is peaking, but they knew that, we had their backs, right? And they knew that they had space to do their thing, make mistakes, we're gonna fix it along the way. But that resulted in just a really good outcome. And again, I don't think I've ever seen that many IRs running parallel in the way that we did it. And it's a cool story. And I hope I never have to do it again, right? That was like one of my last big incidents when I was still at CISA. SolarWinds was a whole nother beast, but I'm really proud of the direct send response that Jesse and team did.
Yeah, I can tell you guys killed it because you're both still smiling.
yeah, Solar Winds was crazy, Log4j was crazy, but that direct send one was pretty impactful. So, and it was kinda interesting how, like, you have the technical challenge with the scope and everything, but when every single client is impacted at the exact same time, the concept of this is low or medium priority just goes right out the door. So,
Yeah, because you're running a response, but you also have all the other work going on too, right? We can't just stop operations and triaging alerts. And yeah, I think for me, that was one of the first times that I saw the maturity of our team really come together full force, right? Where I could sit there and just kind of help them and really just be a customer interface, right? Keep the customers calm. But the team just operated, right? And I love it. It's great to see.
And we talk a lot about people process technology. I think that one really tested the process a lot because we have, very, very good processes put in place with our people for incident response, and the processes are scalable, and we thought they were scalable, and we found out that they were scalable. 'Cause- so the processes were heavily tested in that one as well.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. It is your turn to leave a cliffhanger or two, since we have both of you, for the next guest.
Okay, I got one. If your SOC were a movie genre, what would it be and why?
That's awesome. Jesse?
I think I was going to ask something about maybe like a habit or a mindset that separates, really good analysts from average ones. But I think we kind of talked about that. So I think I'll do a more like technical question, board question. Like if your AI is autonomously triaging alerts, it's closing alerts, it's escalating alerts. What's your framework and how do you make sure it's not just silently normalizing your risk over time? How do you measure and audit the decision quality at scale and not just the efficiency of AI? Because we talk a lot about its efficiency, but we put a lot of time into our measuring and auditing of the decision quality. So that'd be my question. How do you measure and audit the decision quality at scale?
Great. Love these two questions. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you both on the show. Thank you for your time, and really excited for our guests to give this a listen.
We loved it, and thank you for having us, Ann.
And thank you, Ann.